So, hello and welcome along to another edition of Isolation Interviews for Hospital Radio Reading and for my YouTube channel. And I'm super excited to be joined all the way from Australia by the fantastically talented Kate Atkinson. Thank you, Kate, for joining me.
Matthew, thank you so much. And hello, everybody watching.
Now, we were just talking off air, and before we sort of get properly into the interview, you've obviously sort of spent a fair bit of time in the UK. So, sort of, what are your memories of your time over here?
Well, I have a few connections to the UK. My mum grew up in Gateshead in the north, and so she's a proud Geordie and just happened to marry a Tasmanian, so she ended up in Australia. But so I've always had a connection through my mum. And my aunt and my cousins still all live in the UK. They're around the Lancashire area, and I have a cousin in Wales. So I'm half English by breeding, but I also lived there in the early 2000s, from about 2005 to about 2008, and I lived in London, but I did a bit of touring theatre, so I got to see a lot, and all the way up to Scotland, and had a ripper of a time.
Now, obviously, the last couple of years, things have been mad for everyone. I mean, for you, how have you been affected by, obviously, the pandemic and the lockdowns? I mean, how has it affected you personally and how work-wise, how has it been?
Look, I feel, given my audience, that I have very little to complain about. I mean, my life has been one of adapting to change, and obviously the entertainment industry took a massive hit, but I've seen that unfold much more problematically for my friends in live theatre and live music. Particularly, I'm speaking from Melbourne, and Melbourne is notorious in Australia for having the longest and strictest lockdowns. So look, it was inconvenient and unpleasant, but I'm guessing that I'm speaking to people who are working on the front line of the hospital system and people who have had to, juggle various medical ills and vulnerabilities. And so I just feel, for the most part, like I've been incredibly lucky. And, for people that watch Wentworth, we got shut down. We were, shut down, tools down, at the very beginning of the pandemic, which was the great unknown. And then we were one of the very lucky productions that actually got to go back into production by virtue of the fact that we're a prison show. So we only really had to inoculate, if you like, one set. So when you're a traveling circus of a show and you've got trucks going to various locations and you're inviting lots of new people into your environment, it gets trickier. So we were lucky in one way. It was difficult in another way, because if you've watched Wentworth, you'll appreciate that everything happens in very close proximity. Often involves, either violent or intimate touch. So we were one of the first shows to come up with incredibly comprehensive COVID safety plan, and it's a blueprint that got used on other TV sets around Australia. So, I've been very lucky. We've all had big droughts where work has been unknowable. But the main thing is that I've been in good health, and most of the people I know have, we've been pretty lucky in Australia because we had incredibly strict border closures. The main thing is we haven't got sick. And having spoken about my mum earlier, that's been the trickiest thing. So in Australia, for those of you who don't know, we're one country but divided up into states. And this pandemic has been a very interesting experiment in how those states do or don't cooperate. And Western Australia, which is where my mum lives, is the one that has had the strictest border closure. So I haven't been able to see my mother for most of this pandemic. That's hard and not nice, but she's been in good health, and I've had friends who've had parents that they couldn't visit or loved ones who were ill. So I think, I think a lot of my empathy over the course of the pandemic has been from observation and watching and hearing what other people have had to suffer. And it's actually made me realise how very lucky I've been to be in this country, in this, my little home with my neighbours and my friends. And so, the broader global picture has been pretty grim to watch, I have to say. And and I send my love to anyone who's been separated from loved ones in hospital. And that hurts to watch, I think.
I mean, I'd say the one good thing to have come out of the pandemic is the fact that it's brought people closer together in the sense of things like Zoom and Skype and all that. People are connecting, people are making the effort to talk to people and to let's catch up tonight or what have you. And people have been talking with people that they otherwise probably would have drifted away from.
Yeah. And really kind of prioritizing what people need. Suddenly, cramming your social diary, not only did it become impossible, it was just not a priority. It was finding out who needed what and who needed a chat. And I have really lovely neighbours, and luckily we have a communal garden, so we could kind of commune. And so I probably developed different relationships with my neighbours, which was nice. And yeah, Zoom I think it's been a blessing and a curse. I think we kind of had this tsunami of Zoom commitments when the thing started. And we were like, oh God, our social diary is busier than ever. But I mean, this is extraordinary. This is extraordinary that we can do.
And I mean, it's sort of gone are the days where 10 years ago, it'd have probably been a phone call or something. Whereas now we can actually see each other, which is, I love this. I think for interviewing, it's so much nicer to be able to see who you're speaking to.
Yeah. And I hope this doesn't sound lazy, but I kind of don't have to get dressed up.
Exactly.
I thought I'll have a shower, I'll wash my face, I'll just, put a bit of light on. So, you don't have to sit in a makeup chair and get nervous. And so that's kind of nice.
And I mean, talking about Zoom, obviously, the whole of the cast of Wentworth, you guys did a kind of a Zoom conferencey thing where you all got together and obviously talked about the final series. That must have been quite fun to do it differently, because I imagine you guys are used to doing things all together in the same room. So to kind of get to do it a bit differently must have been a bit interesting, let's say.
It was interesting. I think the final season of the show shot under very strict pandemic conditions. And, we stopped and we started. And one of the things we were very clear about, that there were two priorities. One was that everyone was safe, that we looked after everyone in the cast and crew. And two, that we didn't compromise the show, that we didn't suddenly introduce measures that meant we couldn't honour the spirit of the show, such as it is. So with those things in mind, there was a bit of stopping and starting, and it wasn't just the end of a show, it was the end of 8 years of a show. And there are certain rites of passage when you do that. And for some of us like me and Katrina Milosevic, Robbie Mangasiva, Jackie Brennan, we'd all been on it since the very beginning. And when it came to an end in the midst of those pandemic measures, I think we were all coming to terms with it in different ways. And some people were already, beside themselves with grief, and others were just kind of trying to get through. We're all processing it very differently. So when we had that Zoom reunion, I think for a lot of us, it was just kind of hitting us then, what we'd been part of, and that it had come to an end, and that, the launches that we would have reunited at, or the red carpets or the awards, none of those things were going to happen. And again, boo-hoo, what a problem. But it was a very special bunch of people. And I think there were mixed feelings of being really sad that it kind of had to end like that, and being really proud that we pulled it off, and we pulled it off without anyone getting hurt or sick, and the audience still getting a good show. So there were really mixed feelings. And, I'd been there a long time. And And for any of you who are familiar with the character I played, you know, there was a great joy and a challenge and lots of interest in playing that role, but it's also quite nice to say goodbye to a character like that as well. So I was, you know, I had mixed feelings. I was very ready to go and very sad to say goodbye to the kind of colleagues that in my industry you don't get all the time, and you don't get to spend that level of time with people. So, you know, can't say it was boring.
I mean, going back to obviously where it all began, do you remember the first time that you were offered the part, or that how the part came about? And were you aware of the kind of the history of Prisoner? I mean, was it something that you were a fan of?
Yeah, it's there are a few things to say about this show. I was turning 40 when this show was kind of, you know, there was movement in the station and everyone was talking about it. And I had gone back to academic study. I was doing one of those, I'm giving up acting, I'm walking away. I was having one of those moments. So I was off at university, and I was taking the odd bit part just to, you know, subsidise my student work, you know, so it's a pretty good student job. So I was quite happy just taking little subsidiary roles, and I was sitting down at the breakfast table with an old mate of mine who's a cinematographer, and he said, "Oh, did you know they're doing a remake of Prisoner?" He said, "There's going to be so many great roles for women," and, you know, and I thought, oh, look, I don't know if that's for me. I was very familiar with Prisoner. I didn't watch it religiously. I was quite young when it was on, and it wasn't something my mum wanted. So I was very aware of its iconic status, and I was very aware of the really central characters, including Vinegar Tits. Anyway, so this script came to me. I knew the setup director very well, and he was someone I liked very much. So I went, oh, look, I'll give it a shot. I won't get this. And I did get the role. And even funnier still, when I got the role, I remember you verbatim. I went to the pub the night I heard that I'd got the role, and to meet a bunch of friends that I regularly met. And I said to them, look, I've just landed this role, but it's kind of this reworking of Prisoner. And I said, I don't think this thing's got legs. I don't know if this thing's got legs. I'll give it one season and then I'll go back to study. Suffice to say, the study took a back seat. And I did end up finishing a degree, but it was not quite the, you know, it wasn't the PhD I'd hoped it was going to be.
So, I mean, obviously, the show came along, you know, Vera Bennett, such a great character. I mean, people, obviously, over the time, you know, the course of the show's running, obviously, she was, you know, just a sort of like a prison officer, became the governor. That must have been fun to be the big boss.
So fun. I mean, so fun. I mean, Vera is like, you know, imposter syndrome incarnate. Like, she just is like faking it till she makes it, until she kind of does make it. She's really kind of, you know, knows what she wants and what she'll put up with, and by the end. But yeah, putting the governor pants on, as we like to call it, was pretty fun. And of course, it was always great because Pam Rabe and I had a great working relationship, and there was nothing more fun than those first days of kind of reveling in that role reversal. So, you know, we had a great deal of fun with that partnership. So yeah, I never thought I would, you know, that was kind of the joy of playing Vera Bennett. You start playing this character and think, yeah, how long do I want to play the punching bag? Do you know what I mean? And then the character, the writers, to their credit, had a whole other vision for that character. And when a series goes for that long, there's a little bit of give and take. Like, you kind of give them things and they go, oh, maybe we could take it in this direction. So, you know, full credit to the writers to going, we reckon this is going to be one of the most transformative characters in the show, for good and bad. So I was very lucky, and, you know, great playmates to play off.
I mean, if you were to have met Vera, obviously, in a pub or something, do you reckon you would get on? Do you think you'd have been friends?
Hmm, that's a good question. I No, I don't know. My friends were all a bit barking mad and and God, no, I don't know. I don't think she would let you in. I don't think she was very good at letting people in. So I don't know. My friends tend to be quite hearty and affectionate uh, and not work in prisons. So I don't know. But I'm sure had we got to know each other, I think she had a good heart to a point, and certainly had, she had good party stories. She had good, good anecdotes.
And I mean, working with Pamela Rabe, we were just saying, I mean, there's such a great partnership. And I imagine, I mean, you guys must have got on really well on set. But I mean, the chemistry between you guys on screen was electric and was fantastic. And I mean, I did get to interview her last year, and she is very, in on the show, she comes across as very scary. But I imagine she's nothing like that in real life.
She's a dream. She's a complete dream. In that she's one of Australia's most accomplished theatre actresses. She is so hardworking, so imaginative, so on it. Like it just, but at the same time, she's a clown and she's generous and she's playful and she's the kind of actor that knows she's going to get the best work out of herself and the scene if she's also, encouraging good work from her, so she's unselfish and fun. And we had not worked before. We knew each other, and we were certainly familiar with each other's work. And from the get-go, we certainly got on very well, but I don't think anyone anticipated that relationship would have the many dimensions that it had. And the more it did, the more we got excited about it, the more, when we were working on a scene, we'd try to tease out more and more layers. And then it's really up for the audience to decide what they make of that. But we were Pam was very good at encouraging ambiguity. It's like we don't have to spoon feed them what this relationship means, So the more complex and the more contradictory it got, the more excited we were by it. So we were very lucky.
And I mean, there was a lot of violence where, we touched upon it earlier in the show. I mean, when you're filming those scenes, that must be a lot of fun, but there must also be a bit of a sort of you must be a bit nervous doing those kind of sort of stunts and everything.
Yeah, look, to be honest, I didn't do a lot of brawling. I think if I took a tally, I think I was held hostage 3 times. I had, arms around the neck and a shiv to the belly and a gun to the head and, but I didn't do the full on fisticuffs that some of the other girls did. I think, and I don't think I'm alone in saying this, and I think, I certainly think there was a scene where Pam was lynched, and that scene took 2 days to film, and I'm sure she had to deal with that in her own way. But you'll hear a lot of actors say that when you're being asked to do something wholly physical, that it's quite liberating. We spend a lot of time in our heads and going, oh, how do I act, and how do I how do I make sense of this line, and all of the thinking and interpreting. And when you're asked to do something wholly physical, just your breathing takes over and your reflexes take over. That then has to be measured with, if it does involve throwing punches and, with the stunt coordination that you do. So it's a little bit like choreography. So there's this other kind of physical reflex that takes over that I think a lot of actors really enjoy because it takes you out of your head. But I never had to do, I'm sure other actors had to find ways of processing, if they've had to perpetrate violence on someone or be the recipient of violence, really high stakes violence. And I'm sure they would have to find ways of of processing that and looking after themselves physically and mentally. I mean, I must say, I think most of the violence for Vera was this kind of internal torture. You know, there was a lot of psychological torture. I did have to deliver a baby in a siege. That was physically taxing. But again, you just go into this zone. So it's I think you'll find a lot of actors will say it's quite a it can be a really kind of weirdly fun part of the job.
I mean, obviously, you know, when the show did obviously come to an end, I mean, for you, I know you said obviously it kind of felt probably the right time to go, but what was, I mean, I imagine it must have been tough to sort of have to say goodbye to the character, although I don't think that character will ever leave you, and I don't think the show will ever get forgotten about because it's so popular.
Yeah. Do you know what I think is really nice is that, you know, when you're in the throes of a show and we're being asked to do interviews and additional footage for the DVD and we're kind of, you know, we're filming it and we're talking about it and we're, you know, it's all the time and you've got 8 seasons muddling around in your head and you're going, oh, I don't even know. There's something really nice now about just getting more and more distance from it and knowing that people will keep watching it for some time and that, you know, hopefully we'll be asked to have these conversations. And so we're looking back at it with a different kind of appreciation and nostalgia and hopefully it will bring us together, you know, like we'll get to see the other cast members, you know, because people will ask us to do things. And I actually think we'll all come to appreciate it more and more the more distance we get from it. And it's, you know, some shows, you know, date very quickly. I think the fact that Prisoner is still, or Cell Block H, I think you call it in Britain, you know, it's still something people will dip into every now and then. So I hope that perhaps we'll have a similar kind of legacy. You know, we've obviously introduced topics that are a little bit more 21st century, so they might date. But yeah, I think we all feel very lucky that this is probably something that will have quite a enduring life, I hope.
And I mean, if the opportunity, maybe sort of 10, 15 years in the future, if the opportunity came to revisit the character, do you think you would want to, or do you think Vera's best left where she was?
I do think she's best left where she was. I did another show many years ago, probably 20 years ago here in Australia, and they did a reboot of that. And I chose not to revisit that character. Partly because I guess they kind of, you know, they're real landmarks in periods of your career. And, you know, you should never say never. You know, it really might depend on what the framework is and what you're being asked to do. So never say never. But I felt like we'd probably said enough about Vera Bennett by the time we got to the end.
I mean, like you say, it's, you know, it's a long chunk of time, and I imagine that when you have lived, because you must get to the point where when you're playing a character for so long, you end up taking them home with you. I mean, it kind of can take over your life. I mean, did you find that at all with Vera?
Look, again, don't want to sound lazy, but I'm very good at leaving my character in the dressing room. I'm very good at it. And when they're Vera Bennett, I think you actually find the opposite. You're so rigid, and stitched up and moralizing and, you know, authority there and control there and, you know, no sense of humor there, although she did get one by the end. You find that you're actually, you know, those things in yourself that you are repressing all day actually probably come out a little bit more. So it probably does affect you in that way. I think, you know, it kind of made you enjoy the things about your life that you had outside of that prison environment. As much as it was a great work environment, it was a very particular culture. So, and also I was very lucky that we shoot it in Melbourne and I live in Melbourne. So I had the rest of my life around me. So I think sometimes when you travel for work and you're not in your hometown, you're living in an apartment and you're mostly socializing with your other castmates, perhaps that's different. But I was quite good at leaving Vera in the governor's office. Yeah.
And I mean, like we've said a few times, obviously the show is so hugely popular. What's kind of been your reaction from fans, people when they meet you? I mean, I imagine that people kind of want to talk about Vera all the time. So what's your interaction been like with the fans?
Um, Almost always, I'll say this up front. The way fans interact with actors now is very different. I've been in this game for 28 years. And social media has introduced a whole different way of communicating with actors in a show. And I've chosen not to participate in that for various reasons. Sometimes I'll be made aware of something through the grapevine that maybe needs my attention, or, but I mostly choose not to get involved. So the fan interaction I have is either on the street, people who come up and are almost always incredibly respectful and friendly and lovely, or I get old-fashioned fan letters that come through my agent's office, and people send beautiful letters, and sometimes things for you to sign, and they've gone to the trouble of including a self-stamped envelope and a thing, and if someone goes to that level of trouble, rather than posting, can you say hi to me on Instagram, I'm like, sure, what do you want? So it's very oldie worldy, my interaction with the fans and this stuff, which is great. There have been a few conventions, where you go, and which of course COVID has put to a crashing halt. And I'd only done one of those, and it happened to be in the UK, and that was fun. But mostly people are either really shy, and you can tell they're staring at you, and you almost feel like going, oh, I'd just rather you just came up and we just got this over with. They're just shy. And I'd probably do the same. I do the same if I see someone. Some people just think, well, I'll leave her alone. And other people come up and say nice things. And it's, I've had the odd, can I have a photo? And I've just been on a plane for 24 hours, and you're like, oh God, all right. I'm not looking my best, but here you go. But, it's not, I'm not super famous, like I have a kind of a loyal following of people who are very familiar with Australian shows, and they're very nice.
And I mean, going forward, is there a dream role for you? Is there something that you haven't had the chance to do yet that you would love to do if it was offered?
No, look, I love doing new works. It's not like I look at the kind of traditional, theatre canon and go, oh, I haven't played Lady Macbeth yet. I do love new works, and I do love doing Australian stuff. I've just done something I thought I never would do, which is a new installment of the Underbelly franchise, which is kind of true crime here. And I've just played a real life person who was a terrible criminal, like a terrible fraudster who defrauded people out of money and then disappeared and apparently has died, but we don't know. And it's been a scandalous story down here in Australia. So I've just played a kind of a very complicated and superficially villainous person, and had to kind of flesh that story out, and that that was fascinating for me.
And I imagine it must be nice to go from playing the good guy to then playing the bad guy.
So good. It's so good. It's a cliche. People always say, oh, it's more fun playing the bad guys. It kind of is. Particularly if there's a level of complexity to, but when people are just being, as this woman was, just fraudulently poisonous, you're just like, wow, I just have to go there. I'm not even sure how to explain this. I'm just going there. So that's fun. In an ideal world, Pam Rave and I would like to work together again. So we would love to, conjure something up where we could work together again, whether that's on stage or screen or whatever. So that would be a dream role.
That would be amazing. I think everyone would want to see that. Now, I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. But before we go, have you got any messages you'd like to give to anyone who is currently listening from hospital? Anything you'd like to say to them?
Oh gosh, look, I really can't really appreciate what it's like to be in hospital at a time like this. I hope you can see loved ones. I hope you can access the very best care that you can get. Thank you, Matthew, for providing this incredible initiative. I think it's fantastic. I'm an actor, I'm not a healthcare worker, so I just take my hat off to everyone who is just running a longer than we ever anticipated marathon on this thing. I really, really, appreciate everything, to Australians who are doing the same thing, to all of you. And if you're sick and unwell, please take care and keep your chin up and surround yourself with good people.
Thank you so much, Kate. It's been an absolute pleasure. Of course, keep safe, and you are welcome back anytime.
Thank you, Matthew, and thanks for doing this. And all my love to everyone who's doing it tough in hospital, worker and patient alike.